I'm William Graper, and this is The Recovering Elitist, a show that explores the space between who we appear to be and who we actually are, the tension, our transformations, and the truth behind success. Nikki Ogunnaike, thank you so much for being here on The Recovering Elitist. I'm glad you're here because I really feel that people in positions of power have so much to teach us. And ultimately, that's what this show is about. And I think you're so elite at what you do. You're the editor-in-chief of Marie Claire. But I think the truth is, what attracts me to you so much is you seem to toe this line between the atrocities of the world, the action that we need to take. But at the same time, you touch in the world of joyful and playful and at times superficial, like style can be superficial. You're this amazing role model for how we dance between those two worlds. I often find myself and so many people I know either leaning hard into taking action or totally shutting down or getting lost in the material world, online shopping, addiction, whatever it is. So I wanted to have you on to ask you, where do you find that balance and ability to lean into what's real and what needs action and what is hard? And then what is playful and joyful and beautiful?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here, and thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate that. I think that the balance comes a little naturally, honestly. I think that being a Black woman in corporate America, it can be tricky, to say the least. And I think that oftentimes in positions of power, you can be scared to be vocal about things, or one can be scared to be vocal about things. Or alternatively, one can be scared to show off their true personality. And I've just found that in this industry, it just sort of works for me. I don't really know any other way to be. I've always been interested in fashion and beauty and style, but I also come from a world where my parents, they made us watch 60 Minutes growing up. So my dad read newspapers every Sunday. I was always surrounded by news and journalism. My sister is a journalist. She has written for everywhere from Rolling Stone to the New York Times. She was on CNN. So that mix of pop culture, fashion, style, politics has just always been in my life. And I don't really know any other way to behave, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What were your early examples of style or presentation that stick out to you as being important?
So I grew up in Virginia, right outside of DC, and we grew up going to church every Sunday. And that was the opportunity to really get dressed. My parents both worked in retail. My dad was a manager at CVS. My mom was a manager at Staples, and they wore uniforms every day to work. But when Sunday came, that's when my dad was ironing the clothes. My mom was pulling out her Delman high heels. We were getting our hair done, all of the things to be able to present stylishly at church. And so that was always a bit of a runway or a time to show off, especially when it was like Easter and we were getting dressed. That weekly ritual around presentation was really important in my family when we were growing up.
Were there early signs of how that brought community and culture together, presentation and style, that was influential to you? Or was that unique to your family?
No, I think that if you ask any American, Nigerian person, presentation and community go hand in hand often, especially at like Nigerian weddings. The bride's family will wear one color, the groom's family will wear one color. If you're Nigerian American, you're often getting changed. You're doing your white gown for ceremony, but you're also wearing your traditional for your other ceremony. And so all of this sort of like getting dressed rituals and presentation around these big moments was always just something that I saw while I was growing up.
And you went on to UVA to study sociology. And I read somewhere that you had said that sociology gave you this opportunity to see how different people were portrayed in print. I'm curious about that specifically and what you learned, but I'm also really curious, as you grew up, did you feel that you saw yourself in print or in media?
That's a really interesting question. So I went to UVA. We didn't have a proper journalism school. UVA, I was of the first class that was a part of their media studies program. And media studies at that time was like newspapers and television journalism. But I'd always been a magazine head. I grew up reading Teen People and YM and 17 and glamour. So Lucky was like my end all be all. So
Oh, yeah.
I loved magazines growing up, but no, I didn't see a lot of women who necessarily looked like me in print. But thankfully, the 90s was a great time for Black women on television. So you had Living Single in the 2000s, you had Girlfriends, and you had Mad TV, where you would see like Black comedians on TV. And so Moesha was another great show. So there was representation in that regard on television, but in print, no, it was few and far between.
What did studying sociology teach you about the media world and why that was?
I think sociology for me was just a really great way to learn how to write and ask questions and question structures and systems and why things were constructed in the way that they were. And I think that I've always brought that to the way that I look at fashion and style and politics to an extent. Like sociology was like the frivolous major at UVA. But I always found I loved the books that we read. I loved the ability to just sort of like hash things out, to talk about race in the media, women in the media. Those are the kinds of classes that I was able to take through
Mhm.
sociology and through media studies. And that has gone on to serve me really well when we, analyze what's going on in media. Why are people portrayed in this way? And just continue to ask questions and stay hungry in that way.
Mhm. I've always find it crazy that would be considered frivolous, that we would write that off as frivolous, and in the same way that we write fashion off as frivolous, as just objects and materialism. But really, it's the way in which we communicate and express our culture, our deepest truths, our ability to connect with other people. And that's what attracted me to fashion when I was a stylist for 15 years. I'm wondering if that is a part of what made fashion appealing to you.
Yeah, fashion for me, I think, has always been less about the objects, right? Like I love clothes, obviously, but it's always been a little bit more about what we're trying to communicate with our style choices. Thinking about personal style, I think the discourse around it right now has gotten a little out of hand. But previously, when we would talk about personal style, we would talk about why is that girl wearing a leather jacket? Or why does indie sleeves look that way? And what does that mean? Or like, what does the return of indie sleeves right now in 2025 mean? Those sorts of questions around clothing have always been really interesting to me. I think we have people who are obsessed with the designers and the business side of things, or like the conglomerates and all of those things. But for me, it's always been about what story can you tell, or what story are people trying to tell with their
Mm.
clothing and with the way that they present themselves.
Mm. Yeah, you did such a beautiful job with Gabrielle Union on the cover of the magazine, Marie Claire, for the motherhood issue. This is such a beautiful way of taking what people are trying to express and grapple with and deal with and act on and speak out about through the medium of something beautiful that is
Hmm.
written off as something frivolous, but you're pairing it with something so not frivolous. And that contrast to me is so appealing. And I've often wondered why it's taken fashion so long to have that conversation directly. And I feel like it takes you, really, it takes you to say, this is a conversation we should be having directly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I take my work very seriously, but I don't take myself very seriously, right? Like I work very hard, but I don't think I'm off limits, or I don't think that things are above reproach, or we're not allowed to talk about these things. I like to have fun. I enjoy joy. I bring that to the things that I cover, the things that I do, the people that I like to spend time with, my side of TikTok, like all of the things have a bit of like joy and thoughtfulness infused in everything that I do.
Mm. I guess that's what I want to drill down on a little bit because I'm like, is that natural to you that you're able to take topics and matters very seriously, but you don't take yourself seriously? I think I am guilty of taking myself very seriously at times and falling into fashion and thinking this is so serious. And, there's a weight of the world thing that was self imposed and maybe culturally imposed. But towing the line between not taking everything so seriously or myself so seriously, but allowing the world to be serious and have things we need to take seriously is
Hmm.
something I don't think most people really know how to do.
I think that could possibly be because a lot of people don't lead intersectional lifestyles, right? As a Black woman in America who cares about fashion and who comes from a Nigerian background, all of these things color the way that I operate. And
Mm.
so I think that a lot of people have the privilege of not caring about things or not worrying about things. The sort of idea of me being the first Black woman to lead Marie Claire, that comes with some gravitas, that comes with some heaviness, whether that's self-imposed or just other people sort of looking at what holding this position could mean. I think that oftentimes, when I look at myself and I look at this role, I don't have the privilege, nor do I want the privilege of putting things in the background or not caring about things. I think it's awesome that Marie Claire is a place where we can have conversations about power and purpose and style, and that's okay. That's a part
Mm.
of the DNA. And I feel very at home in this space where I can bring all the many facets of my life to work every day because that's just a part of the DNA. We've been doing it for 30 years, and that's always been the case.
To me, that says a lot about the support given to the magazine through advertisers and money. Because when I think about why there isn't representation, or I think about why certain magazines don't lean in, I think about money. I think about people who are worried about their bottom line and don't want to rock the boat and want to keep it real straight and narrow. That's so frustrating. And as an editor who's worked at magazines, it's like you get the list of advertisers and you have to shoot those things. And that's something that I can get behind. It's different when you're talking about representation of diverse groups. So you must have a team of people who are okay to take risks and say, we're going to try something new. Tell me what that's like, having that.
Well, I think what's really great is I have a leadership structure that's okay with taking risks. So Hillary Kerr is my boss. Her title is Chief Content Officer, I would say, for like women in luxury at Future. And she is down to have the hard conversations. She leads by example. So in that, I feel comfortable taking risks, right? And then when I think about the women that I'm hiring to work at Marie Claire, these are all incredibly hungry, incredibly diverse, incredibly ambitious women who are okay and excited to have the conversations, who say like, thank you, let's go there. Like, we may not always get it right, or we may not always land it or stick it the way that we want to the first time, but at least we tried and we will have another opportunity to try again.
You mentioned in our pre-interview that your toxic trait is pretending not to care what other people think, even though you care deeply. And I wanted to dive in on that a little bit because I'm exactly the same. I'll present like I don't care, but I'll be thinking about maybe how this went for, 3 more days.
Mm-hmm.
You were one of the first to digital. So we all know digital is now obviously king. But I remember when I worked for Condé and I worked in print, and everybody was getting longer and longer shot lists because they're like, we need to use some of this for digital now. So you've got to shoot more. The resistance to digital was so real from the inside, which is crazy when you think about an industry trying to lead the way, and be forward thinking.
Totally.
So you went to glamour.com, which is a risk at the time. So how do you measure sort of that caring what other people think deep down with taking risks like that?
Early on, I'd seen the writing on the walls. I think that if anyone is paying attention in 2012, magazines were shutting down, teams were getting tasked with doing more for less. And sure, print was king during that time, and print certainly serves a function now. But of course, social matters, digital matters. I remember one girl being like, whoa, you're really brave for going to work for digital. And I was like, that is such a crazy statement to make. First of all, I'm going to work on a website. That is not bravery. It's just getting another job that's going to pay me more.
Right.
And
Right.
frankly, the opportunities were not there for me in print at the time. And so I had to pave my own way. I had to pave my own path. And the way to do that was through digital. And it sucked sometimes. It sucked not getting seats at shows because we were digital editors, but we stayed the course. We believed in the work that we were creating, both at Glamour and both at Elle. And from there on, the industry caught up. The industry continues to catch up. I think, again, like when you're just sort of in these positions where you realize that these structures are not necessarily built for you, or they're not built with you in mind, then you are comfortable with taking risks because that's sort of the only way to get where you want to go in the future.
Mm-hmm. This may be the wrong way of putting it, but it's almost like sometimes an outsider mentality makes you just get real creative and you're like, I have nothing to lose and I'm just going to shoot the moon here.
Absolutely. You get scrappy. You know that the budgets are not going to be coming to you, so you figure out how to do it anyway. I look at the digital editors that I worked with at the time, and I'll never forget there was a print editor that I was working with at the time. We were both at Paris Fashion Week, or it was Milan Fashion Week, and she was like, "Whoa, you know everyone." And I was like, "Yeah, the digital editors have to know each other because we band together in this way. Like we have to stick together in this way because at the time it really was a print versus digital mentality.
Yes.
Now that would never fly. That feels so silly to even think about that divide, but it was real. You saw the way that print editors related to digital editors. You saw the way that they related to bloggers, and how blogger was like a gross, dirty word for a period of time. And
Hmm.
so there were a great group of women who were digital editors around the same time that I was, where we were able to just band together.
Yeah. I remember, I forget which big editor it was. She left a magazine and went to Instagram, and everybody was like up in arms and was like, I can't believe she would do that. Now you look back and you're like, smartest decision ever that you were able to go in and learn really how this whole thing worked
Hmm.
at the time when it was building is such an amazing thing. I mean, in retrospect, it's easy to say, digital is king. Yeah, that makes so much sense. But like you were one of the first doing YouTube and Snapchat and all these different channels that were at the time very controversial. I couldn't get clothes to save my life to do a photo shoot for digital for so long. It just took knocking on every door. So that perseverance in you is obviously there. But also, what were you seeing in the online space that was inspiring to you? Was there a conversation happening you felt you didn't see anywhere else? What was it?
There was just a wealth of opportunity. Like I remember at InStyle, one of my girlfriends who worked there with me started a blog, and she would get invited to all of these events, and she would get whatever from brands to like shoot and photograph. She was meeting all of these cool new people, and we were young. We were in our 20s in New York, running around the Lower East Side, and she just had such great opportunities. And I was like, I want that. I want opportunities. And the opportunities are not coming to me in this very rigid print structure. So I want to go somewhere where I can be a little more scrappy, where I can be a little more nimble. And Glamour and especially Elle at the time were the places where I really found that.
Hmm. Yeah, I also remember I read an article in my preparation for our conversation about your time at Elle and how, you were one of, I think it was two senior women of color, a Black woman at that magazine, at that website at the time. And you'd said it was really the place that you learned that you could influence stories and you could influence the types of people that were on the pages of those magazines or on the websites that were being shown. And you had the ability to hire in a way that was inclusive and more representative of a population that is more representative of the people that are actually shopping and buying clothes. So, how did you balance that responsibility with that power?
Working at Elle was so special. Working at Elle.com was a really, really special time. Leah Chernikoff, who's the executive editor at Harper's Bazaar, was my boss there. And she just created this Avengers squad of editors. I worked with Julie Schott, who's the founder of Starface. I worked with Sally Holmes, who's the editor in chief of InStyle. She really found people who matched her sort of energy and this idea of getting scrappy, rolling up your sleeves, willing to do whatever it took to get the story, and encouraged that in us. And that came down to, hiring the right people. Yeah, hire that writer that you met on Twitter. It seems like they have a good voice. Give them a shot. I think she, again, is the sort of person who was willing to take risks, was encouraging us to take risks. And because of that, we had this sort of like mentality where if it didn't work, that's fine, fail fast. Like it's fine. We'll just move on to something else. And having that sort of instilled in us in our late 20s, early 30s was really instrumental in the way that I manage and the way that I lead today.
Is there a hire or a shoot, or maybe a designer found that you recall as being a moment you're really proud of at, it doesn't have to be at L.com because now you're at Marie Claire. Maybe it's recent, but curious if there's a moment that stands out to you as like, wow, I have power here and I want to use it.
Yeah, totally. When Law Roach was working with Celine Dion, I wrote, I think, the first story on his work with her. We all know where Law is right now, but I realized in those stories going viral, in my connections with Law and knowing that he was just starting out with Celine and then going on to work with Ariana Grande and obviously blowing up into who he is today, we got in on the ground floor of Law Roach. And that is really incredible for me.
I have to also give a shout out to Chrissy Rutherford because when she was at Bazaar,
Totally.
she was one of the first people to see me and say, you should have a web series for Bazaar. And it was during a time when there were really no queer hosts in that space within a magazine like that.
Hmm.
And I was like, I was wearing dresses and like I was already doing that in my own life. But it was at a time when men's influencing had nothing to do with that. In fact, I had so many people say, who are you selling to? Men or women? We don't really know where to place you. And it was like Bazaar and Chrissy and the ability to see something before it's seen and say this deserves a voice takes so much courage, but at the same time it makes so much sense that you're like, how has this taken so long, and how are we now in a place where we're decimating the idea of DEI and inclusion and representation? And I'd love for you to speak to that specifically when it comes to women, Black women, women of color, and in leadership positions.
Yeah, I mean, it's really quite depressing when you look at the state of where we were in 2020, coming off of the racial reckoning, coming off of, what seemed like a time where people cared about DEI, where it was a priority, and to see where brands are now 5 years later is frankly really sad, and it is really upsetting. I just know that as a Black woman in power, I can only sort of affect what is sitting in my immediate sort of vicinity, and I can really only lead by example. And so when I say lead by example, I mean hiring women of color, hiring people who may present differently, thinking about the writers that we are hiring, but then also thinking about the stories that we are telling, and knowing, again, this goes back to a little bit of the people pleaser tendency in me, or the caring about what other people think of me, knowing that you can't please everyone. Every story is not for every person, but knowing that the woman who reads Marie Claire will get it, and sitting with that and being comfortable in that. And I think the same thing when we think about brands, knowing that every brand doesn't have to be for everyone, but knowing that your core audience at your brand will get it. And that's who you need to serve at the end of the day.
You had an article that you wrote where it was a curation of a lot of different heavy hitters in the fashion industry, and it was how to fix fashion. And I loved it, not only because I thought it was edited and laid out so well, like the way that you could interact with it was just felt so nice and so easy to read and so juicy. But one of the questions was, you have to believe fashion is worth saving. And I guess my question for you is, do you, after all you've seen and the backtracking we're doing, do you believe fashion is worth saving?
Yes, 1000%. I think when we step out of the New York bubble, when we step out of the celebrity bubble, fashion still ultimately is the way that people tell stories about themselves. It's the first way that people tell stories about themselves, whether you like getting dressed or you enjoy getting dressed. I often think it's interesting when people say, like, I don't care about fashion. I see that sort of similarly when people are like, I don't do politics. It's like, no, you do. Your absence of getting dressed or your absence of not caring about politics says something to me. And so I do think that caring about fashion is incredibly important, because it's not just the clothing, and it is the way that people present themselves, but it is also that sort of intersection when we think about who are the people. When we, for example, when we talk about made in America, what does that mean? Made in America is made by immigrants, right? And
Hmm.
so there will always be that sort of intersection when it comes to fashion. And so, yes, fashion is worth saving. Fashion is worth pushing to be better and to do in a different way, because it's not just about the clothing. It's about the people who make this industry.
I'm curious what you think the difference between fashion and clothing is.
I mean, clothing is product. It's my shirt. It's my bag, but I think when we think about fashion, it is the meaning that we ascribe to these products and what we are trying to say with these products. Why do we care about a designer bag more than we care about a bag that's $10? Or why do we get so excited when a bag is $10? And why don't we interrogate what that means, or how a bag could possibly cost $10? Like,
Right.
we got to go down that rabbit hole a little bit more, guys. We got to think about these things. When I think about the fashion industry, I do think that it is worth asking more questions, being more inquisitive, getting into the why behind the what, because that is the difference, I think, between fashion and clothing.
Hmm. Yeah, if a bag is $7, we need to call the cops. Like, what? We need to call someone because this is
we
not.
we got to look into it. Your bags should not cost $7. Your jeans should not cost
No.
$10. That is something's not right with the way that it's being made.
I know. And the rationale that I'm hearing from people, and most of them are invested in these companies, is that now more than ever, young people or people that don't have the money to spend on clothing now have options and they have the resources to be able to express themselves. And I hadn't planned on talking about fast fashion, but I am curious your thoughts on that because there is this like access that is given to more people to have great clothing and express themselves. But then there's also this like wastefulness and this, disposableness that I think is really harmful.
I always tell people that they should invest to the best of their ability. And that
Mm.
means that if to the best of your ability, you can only spend $20 on a top at Zara or $15 on a top at H&M, that's fine. You can't ignore the fact that minimum wage is not enough for people to buy, expensive clothing. People have to spend their money on other things, but I will say that if you get a shirt from Zara, if you get a shirt from H&M, be thoughtful about the fabric that you're buying. Be thoughtful about how you can maintain these things. H&M and Zara can last for 20 years if you take care of it. It can last for 15 years if you take care of it. You just have to be mindful in your waste and in your overconsumption when it comes to fast fashion.
Yeah, I always thought the way to erode trend, like the idea of chasing trends and fast fashion, was to help facilitate people learning about themselves through their clothing. During COVID, I went back to school, got my master's in clinical psychology. I was working as a therapist, but I was like, I want to be doing this in a creative way. And I did these workshops that I called Undressed. And it was like the exploration of ourselves through our objects or like object relations. Ultimately, it's like helping people see that the dress in their closet isn't just a dress. It's like says something about you. And oftentimes when I worked one-on-one with women, I would ask them, dive a little deeper. Why is that dress still in your closet? Why can't you get rid of it? And they would be
Mm-hmm.
like, it represents a time where my husband and I would have sex, or I would go on dates. I felt sexy and now I'm a mom and I don't have, I don't feel that way about myself anymore. And it's helping facilitate this breakthrough that people don't recognize that the dress is not the thing that made you feel sexy. So how can
Mm-hmm.
we help you feel authentically sexy so you can
Mm-hmm.
get rid of the dress or keep the dress, whatever?
Or not feel like you have to buy 7 more of those dresses to
Yes.
capture that feeling.
Yes, or that your husband only liked you because of that dress. How can we get you to really like you? So it isn't really about the clothes. I think that motherhood issue strikes that balance with me that you edited because I just think it's a deeper conversation about something that doesn't seem that deep,
Mm-hmm.
but it is.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the motherhood issue. We really wanted to be thoughtful about the women who we awarded the Power Moms Award, the women who were on the cover, the mix of people who were writing the stories, because motherhood, fashion, style, beauty, power, all of those things are constantly in conversation. And it was our way of saying, like, we care about women in their totality. We care about the village that it takes to raise children, whether you are a mom, a birthing woman, a woman who doesn't have children but is a great fab auntie. Like, we care about all of these people, and the motherhood issue was a really great way for us to honor all of them and the
Mm.
complicated conversations that happen around motherhood.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was doing some personal styling, I don't really know anything that was more trippy for women than motherhood and post motherhood, figuring out what to do with themselves and how to dress and how to present and how to balance all of it. On a deeper level, there's much larger issues like childcare and, clothing just becomes the last thing on the list. I want to pivot a little bit to your incredible podcast. And I want to know how it came about. It's called Nice Talk. And what I love about it is it's such a succinct idea. It's talking with women about the big threes: money, power, and style. And you're speaking to women who have whole lives that are balancing motherhood or trying to obtain power in a system that isn't allowing them to have it, while also talking about style and while also talking about money. So, how did this come to be? Tell me about it.
The podcast came to be, again, because I think I was just sort of observing the landscape. And I was like, podcasting looks fun. I'm a natural yapper. I love talking, shooting the shit with friends. My sister and I did a sort of pop up podcast for New York Fashion Week one year called Well Dressed, where we had people come on and talk about like their fashion journeys. That was a 4-part episode, or yeah, 4 episodes that we did. And so when I came to Marie Claire, if we wanted to start a podcast, what could we talk about? And the framework of discussing money, power, and style are 3 things that came to me because those are the 3 things that people always like sort of shy away from talking about, right? Like people don't really want to talk about how much money they make, even though they say we should talk about how much money we make, or style should be effortless. And so the idea of having a nice talk, it's a bit of a double entendre. So like nice women shouldn't be talking about these things, but when you walk away from a good chat, you say like, nice talk. And so it's been so fun for me to host this podcast because it brings me back to sort of the roots of what I like to do, which is just ask people questions. And to have women like Coco Gauff, Lena Waithe, Asia Wilson on the podcast has just been such a blast for me. And I hope that we get more and more seasons because there are just so many amazing women that of all ages as well. I think that's what's been really fun for me as well, is that we can run the gamut from like a 21-year-old to like a 40-year-old or whatever. And hopefully we can get some even more mature women because of the lessons that they could possibly teach me. I just feel like I get to be a student for an hour while I'm speaking to these women is just so invaluable. So yeah, hopefully more and more seasons to come.
Yeah, I feel like you all touch on things that a lot of other podcasts don't. I listen to a lot of podcasts and I feel like there's tons that say we're speaking specifically to women or specifically to mature women. And like they're all kind of having the same conversations. One of the things that grabbed me in your trailer was about what you paid for your house. The idea that somebody would admit that and talk about that. I just think that's so juicy and necessary. And I think that's also, I mean, Sex in the City was like that people give a lot of credit to that for opening up that conversation. I think we've moved past that at this point and it's now its own thing. But to continue the conversation in a real way and to say that was just the surface, there's so much more than just talking about like men and sex. It's like, what about just talking about you and not have it be externalized?
Yeah, exactly. We had Vivian Tu, who's a money expert on the podcast recently, and she was so great and speaking about like what we should do right now when these tariffs are crazy and how that affects what your summer vacation looks like. Or if you have to go to 10 weddings this summer and you don't want to, how do you get out of going to them when you have that sort of people pleaser mentality or the thought that you must sacrifice to go to everything? Cami Crawford's going to be on an upcoming episode and she's a relationship expert. And it's not just relationships between men and women, but also like work relationships or friendships. And so we got to talk about that a little bit as well. And I think that the framework of money, power, and style just lends itself to deeper conversations and sort of really shows off the multitudes that the women that listen to Marie Claire that we feature in Marie Claire have.
You said something earlier about style should be effortless, speaking to the trope. What is it about that idea? Where do you think that came from? Why do we have this idea that style should be effortless, especially for women?
Well, because everyone thinks that trying hard is cringe, right? Which I'm just really so tired of. Like, it's cool to try, it's cool to care. I promise you, like, free yourself from not wanting to be cringe, free yourself from this worrying about how people are perceiving you. And so I think that boils down to style. Like, you see that in style where it's supposed to look like you just threw this thing on, or no makeup, or being high maintenance to be low maintenance. All of this dialogue, I think, is just toxic, honestly, because it's fine to try. I think it's actually pretty cool.
I feel so sad for my younger self and for other people who have been brainwashed to think it's not cool to try. And I think that's really why this show is The Recovering Elitist, because I found myself so intoxicated by elitism, by having to have the best of everything, the best vacation, the best clothing, the best, all these things. And I was like, I'm just trying to protect myself from the world at this point.
Well, also, as you age, you realize that the person has the house, they have the husband, they have, or the partner, they have the amazing role in C suite, but like all of that can change tomorrow.
Hmm.
I always say that having my first job in 2007, having media collapse in 2008, I'm like, nothing can phase me. And I cannot define myself by work because I know that this can be taken away from me at any second. So you have to ride it till the wheels fall off. Like, you have to try, you have to do your best, you have to be ambitious because who knows what is going to happen tomorrow, especially in the media industry.
Absolutely. And if you find yourself inside of having those things that you've worked really hard for, and also find yourself miserable and being like, I don't have an identity,
Well, what was it all for?
that's devastating. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that it being cool to care is crucial. I spent probably most of my 20s not smiling because I remember being on set looking at what beauty was, and beauty was not smiling. Beauty
Mhm.
was the models would talk with the photographer and laugh, and okay, now we're shooting, frown.
Mm.
I did not realize I had to totally deprogram and unwire that from my head, that beauty was not smiling. We can't care. We can't look enthusiastic. And when I finally woke up to it, I was almost like, I don't know how to survive in this industry because I don't know where the people are who are doing this differently.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd known you at the time, you know?
Totally. I mean, fashion and beauty was so homogenous at the time.
Mhm.
And when you are outside of that structure, when you see that beauty in print or on TV is skinny, waif, white, long hair, you're just sort of, okay, like I could wreck myself, my body, my mental health, trying to subscribe to this and probably still not make it in whatever quote unquote club that you were desperately trying to get into. Or you can go the other way with the like band of misfits who seem to be really having a great time and figure it out that way.
Yeah. And sometimes the pendulum swings. You know, I was really afraid of my femininity, and then I really wanted to be masculine, and everything around me was about the masculine man, the 90s and GQ and all of
Hmm.
that was very
Hmm.
like tech bro, masculine. It was short hair, it was all these things. That was really hard to have the pendulum swing into like, okay, well now I need to be really mask, like that code switching of that, and then coming back into the middle where I'm now back in the band of misfits. But, you know, there's to me what comes to my mind as I say that is burnout. And I
Hmm.
am curious your experience with burnout as, you know, a leader and as somebody who lifts people up, but also just like existing in the world as a Black woman. It's, I'm sure, exhausting. I can't speak to it, but I'd love for you to.
I think to your point though, knowing that the pendulum will swing gives you a bit of perspective, right? Like I'm almost 40 and so I've seen indie sleaze coming back around. I'm like, all right, here we go again. I'm back at the Girl Talk concert. Or like seeing, unfortunately, skinny talk come back into fashion, quote unquote, or into what's hot again. Like I remember that time in the mid 2000s where you wanted to wear your Frankie B jeans, barely covered your butt cracks. And that was the sort of thing, just knowing that that pendulum will swing continuously, you can almost remove yourself from that. And that helps with burnout because you know that you don't have to get on that pendulum to swing.
Love.
Like getting to a certain age, you are able to hop off the train, hop off the pendulum because you just know what being on that can do for your mental health. And you can just opt out and be like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is my style. It's great. I'm fine with it. If you don't like it, okay.
Yeah.
Like, then that's it.
Yeah. You almost need hindsight to be able to say, oh, I see how this comes and goes. And I see myself trying to code switch between these things. And then you're like, I don't have to do that. And you're right. Something about approaching 40, being 40. I just turned 40 in April. So we grew up around that same sort of like Lindsay Lohan, Nicole Richie getting out of a G Wagon with a giant
Hmm.
Starbucks, like way too skinny. And I was obsessed with it at the time. I was totally fed it and I
Of
ate it all
course.
up.
Of
And now
course.
I look at it and I see some of the girls that are coming back that are so skinny or celebrities. I'm like, we need to get this person some help. And I don't want to comment on someone's body, but I just mean that we're fed the idea that is beautiful is something I now have an outside perspective on. So I appreciate you reminding us of that because that's, we're brainwashed, you know?
Yeah. And I think that in just sort of really thinking, really taking a moment to sit and think and say, like, do I want to be a part of continuing those systems? Do I want to be a part of platforming those things? And especially for me being in a leadership position, having the choice and saying, no, I don't want to.
Mm.
That sort of stuff can creep back in, right? It is the asylum that raised me. I am a
Hmm.
part of it. However, being in this leadership position now, you can make active choices to work against that.
The call is coming from inside the house and you don't have to pick up the phone.
And you do not have to answer that phone. Do
Yeah.
not answer.
You are a millennial. I'm a millennial. I laughed out loud in your pre interview where you said that you're recovering from your urge to turn a hobby into a side hustle. Is that really a millennial thing? I feel so seen by you.
I think it is. We were reared during the lean in era, right? If you get a side hustle, then you can buy a house. It's all bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, we're looking at it now and we're like, no, I cannot buy a house. I don't care how many side hustles I have. I don't make enough money, or these systems are not in my favor to buy a home. You also learn about generational wealth when you get older. We're playing on a different playing field. We're starting on different bases. And the urge to side hustle your way out of whatever it is, whatever situation you're in, like, I don't necessarily believe that all side hustles will save you. And I really believe in having a hobby that you just like to do. Mine is
Mm-hmm.
running because you like to do it. I don't want to be a running influencer. I don't want to monetize what I like to do for fun.
But you've had the urge to in the past, and that's part of the recovering. Is there an example of something you've thought about turning in?
I think just the idea of, are you going to be an influencer? I think that was a thing that a lot of people thought about early on. Do I want to turn my Instagram into my main money making source?
Mm.
Like, Instagram is fun for me. It's a hobby for me. It's a place to share and that sort of thing. But I like working at Marie Claire. I like a 401k. I like knowing where my paycheck is coming, and that's fine, right? I don't necessarily think that many people, many millennials or many Gen Zers would frankly would look at their Instagrams or their TikToks in that way, but I'm fine with just having it be something that I do for fun.
It's so true that every single person is now creating a personal brand, and that's been going on for a while. But the idea that you need to turn that into something to monetize, and that we need to start paying Instagram and Meta to even have our friends see our post is just
Mhm.
nuts, and it's such a rigged system of what is seen and what is not that I find actually the most disturbing of what's going on in the media right now. That really it's all pay to play. Even the things that seem casual and amateur are
Mhm.
actually not.
I joke with my friends that I would love to be able to go to a pottery studio and not take home anything that I make, and not have friends be like, "Oh, you should sell it." That is the reason I don't get into pottery, is because I don't want any of that stuff at my house. I just want to get on a wheel for a little bit, right? But like, when people find out that somebody has a pottery practice, they're like, "Oh, are you selling your mugs?" No, I just want to spin some clay for a second. Like, why do I have to sell things, you know?
Oh my God, I did that during COVID. I literally started doing pottery and then I posted it, and then people like, "You're doing pottery now?" And it's like, I can be multiple things. I can have hobbies. The most patronizing thing you can say is, "I just love how you just keep reinventing yourself." It's a hobby. I'm not reinventing myself.
Also, what am I supposed to do? Stay the same person for the next 50 years of my life? Yeah, reinventing yourself is a luxury.
There's a temptation to try and do that too, to stay the course. One of the things you talked about was learning to say no, even when it's difficult to do that. Is there a time in your life that came to mind when you said that?
Um, I think it's more the idea of fearing disappointing people, honestly, like saying no and knowing that, okay, if I don't go to this event, then that looks bad for the PR person and their relationship with their client. Or if I say no, then that hurts my best friend's feelings because I can't come to whatever she's doing. But you have to realize, or I had to realize at least, that my no and my ability to say no was, again, as you said, sort of like the way that I could protect my peace, and also the way that I could show up for somebody more fully in the future. This industry and this world can have you stretch yourself super thin for other people. And then you look up and you're like, why am I sick? Why am I bloated? Why do I not feel my best? Why can't I sleep? And it's because you're doing all of these things for other people out of obligation or out of fear of disappointing pointing other people, when really, if you just said no, things would probably be fine.
I read somewhere that when you're hiring, you're looking for yes and people. And I laughed about this because I say the exact same thing, Nikki, because it's an improv thing. I don't know if you ever did improv, but the idea of yes and is so great. You want the people in the room that are like, yes, and how can I do this better? Yes, and let me get more curious, as opposed to just the energy of not possible. No, that's just such a drainer. I think there's a Gen Z thing specifically going on where it's like claiming and owning a no, but then not having the ability to be yes and.
Yes, there is a huge difference there. I think yes and, if you're a yes and person, that says to me that you're a problem solver, that you are nimble, that you are able to act on your feet. Those are all things that I love. You can say no, and that's fine. And you can have a boundary and that's fine. But I think that oftentimes, sometimes boundaries can come at the detriment of others. And that's not necessarily fair. So when I work with people who are like, yes, and that says to me that you're able to have a conversation. The yes and in improv is because you want to keep it going, right?
Yes.
No is a conversation ender. It's a way to tamp down other people's feelings because you're done with the conversation, but I'm not done with the conversation. I think that we could continue this. And so if, by saying yes and, it keeps things going, it keeps that energy going. And those are the kinds of people that I like to work with. Now, that may not work for everyone else. That's fine. I like my team the way I like my team. I like the people, those are the kinds of people that I like to work with. And so those are the people that I hire.
We're coming to a bit of a close here, and I want to say that I think you're a mentor for so many people, whether you're intentionally mentoring or you're inadvertently mentoring through the work you're putting out into the world. I know you are for me inadvertently. Who are your mentors? Who inspires you? And how important is good mentorship as you're starting a career?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate that. When I think about my mentors, I wouldn't say that I have any formal mentoring relationships, but there are a lot of women who have influenced my career, whether they are people who have come before me, people like Samira Nasser, who's my boss at Harper's Bazaar, or Leia, who's also my boss at Harper's Bazaar, but as I said, we work together at Elle. Hillary Kerr, who's my current boss. But then I look at my group of friends who I came up in this industry with, Shiona Tarini, who's Beyonce's stylist and creative director and also an incredible costume stylist. I look at Tiffany Reed, who's an incredible fashion executive, and we've known each other since our InStyle days. Nicole Chapineau, who's the fashion director at Vanity Fair right now. I have just been so fortunate to have a group of Black women surround me in this industry, and a group of women, frankly, in this industry in general, who look out for me and they don't play about me. And that is really special when I think about giving back to future generations or being a peer mentor to future generations. First and foremost, I think our generation is showing that you don't have to be in competition with everyone in the way that it may have been in the past. And because of that, we are able to grow and elevate each other and work with each other.
And how important do you think it is to find mentors if you're starting your career and you're not exactly sure where you want to take things?
I think it's important to form relationships. I think that people will go to other people and they will say, "Will you mentor me?" There's no drive to like really create a relationship. It's just the ability to say that you have a mentor, right?
Great distinction.
I think that's a huge distinction. If you want to develop a relationship with me or a working relationship with me, that could be something that we work towards, right, in the future. But I don't think that it's fair to either side of the mentorship to say, "Hey, will you be my mentor? I don't really know anything about you. You don't know anything about me other than that we happen to work at the same place." I don't think that's a really solid foundation for a mentor-mentee relationship. So I would just focus on forming great relationships, whether that's with the people who are sort of on the same level with you or the people who are older than you in their careers or the people who are younger than you in their careers.
That's such a good point. It's true. Because, like, how could you possibly know if I'd be a good mentor for you? I think one of the things I always look for is, does this person have the life I want? And not from like an outside, they have the title. Maybe it is partly that, but also like, do they seem joyful? Do they have a family and I want a family? And how are they balancing those things or whatever it is? Figuring out what they have that you want and then trying to learn from them how they achieved it and how they got there, because it's so difficult to balance all of those things. And I think you do that so beautifully. And I want to thank you so much for being here on the show and for continuing to inspire us to dance between what is really difficult and the action that is really needed, but also leaning into that juicy, beautiful, sometimes frivolous, fun style stuff, because that is human.
That is human. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell the listeners, where can we learn more about you and where can we find you online?
So you can find me on social media. All handles are Nikki Ogun. You can find me every Thursday. We drop episodes of Nice Talk wherever you get your podcasts. Read marieclaire.com. Subscribe to my newsletter, self-checkout, through marieclaire.com. And, catch me in these Bed-Stuy streets.
Love. Thank you so much, Nikki.
My name is Nikki Ogunnaike, and I am a recovering people pleaser millennial.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Recovering Elitist. Our show is produced by Christopher Michael, Kelsey McWilliams, and Sasha Grinblatt, with audio post-production by Griffin James. Special thanks to Chase Coughlin for our original theme music and Justin Teodoro for our original artwork. We'd really like to hear from you. What are you recovering from? We hope you'll join the conversation on Instagram or at therecoveringelitist.com, and we hope you'll like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes each and every week. Thank you for listening.